Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Don't Risk It podcast presented by VFIS Client Risk Solutions. This program focuses on the exposures our clients frequently encounter and discusses the potential solutions to help reduce these exposures. I'm your host, Chris Rogers with VFIS Client Risk Solutions, and today we're discussing pediatric injury prevention and safety. I want to welcome Shannon DePatto to the program. Shannon is the Pediatric Trauma Prevention Coordinator for Penn State Health, and Shannon is here to discuss her role with Penn State Health and their efforts to reduce pediatric injuries. Shannon, I want to thank you for joining me today, and I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. So to open up the questioning, can you describe your role and the role of Penn State Health in pediatric injury prevention?
Sure. So my role at Penn State Health is a Pediatric Trauma Prevention Coordinator. A lot of words. What does that mean? Our role as a level 1 trauma center for pediatrics and as well as adults makes us quite unique in the fact that we have the ability to treat what we say as the worst of the worst. We're able to provide that specialty care, which is quite impressive in the fact that we are able to not only take in our pediatric patients, but also our adult trauma patients. So, for example, when you have that motor vehicle crash and there is severe injury with the entire family, they all get to come to one place and receive that amazing specialty care. And that definitely sets us apart. We are the only one level pediatric trauma center in the region or in the state when it comes to adult injuries and pediatric injuries. So my role as a level 1 trauma center for pediatrics is to educate families. You know, our goal is to keep the traumas out of the hospital. We don't want patients coming in. We're able to provide that care, but we want to be able to provide the education to lessen those injuries and lessen those traumas. And that's my job. So I am able to go out into the community and provide education and resources to families to keep families safe and to keep children from, having those injuries or sustaining the severity of those injuries.
So what are the age ranges for pediatrics? I don't have kids, so some of our listeners might need a definitive answer on that. Sure. So like I said, what are the age ranges?
Absolutely. So we're able to treat ages 0 to 17. That's the pediatric age group, quote unquote, if you will. Once that patient, even if they are 17, depending on the level of injury, adult trauma might step in. But typically we are 0 to 17. And once that kiddo reaches the age of 18, that adult trauma will see that patient.
I'm glad I asked that because I wouldn't have assumed a 17-year-old.
Most people don't know. Most people don't realize that age and the level of care then that can be provided. Because again, that's what makes us so special is the fact that we have that specialty care. We have that tiered approach that there are physicians that have the ability to see, patients with any kind of injury.
So I'm guessing that a 4-year-old is going to have different injuries than a 17-year-old. So what injuries occur most often in these pediatric age groups?
Great question. So our top 3, what we refer to as MOIs or mechanism of injuries, are falls. Falls are our number 1 injury across the board for both pediatric and adult. Obviously categorized in different manners. So it could be a fall from a playground. It could be a fall off a changing table. It could be a fall off a table. It could be fall down the stairs. They're categorized in different ways. But falls, number 1 injury that we see coming in as a trauma. And that, I think right there, that answer is super surprising to many people because you think of motor vehicle crashes. Now that's number 2. And so that is interesting. But then number 3, in my mind, is way more interesting. It's penetrating traumas. So in 2020, gunshot wounds took over motor vehicle crashes as the leading cause of injury and death to children. Mind-blowing. I mean, that to us has been catastrophic, obviously, but very interesting when we look at our data to show that penetrating traumas are our number 3 injuries or traumas coming into our medical facility. Amazing. It's just unbelievable.
That's a sad statistic because we know where most of those injuries are most likely coming from.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the approaches to keeping kids safe, more on the civilian side, car safety, home safety, school safety, things like that?
Honestly, the best thing to do or the best way to approach this is just what my role is, and that's education. There are so many ways that we can get the message out there, but it's a matter of people wrapping their heads around it and following it. It's one thing for us to give a family a piece of paper and say, follow these steps. But it's another thing to really present it in a way that families understand it, they get it, and they do it, and they follow it, right? And so that's where our role comes in as the educator. And it's interesting because we've had this conversation regarding educators versus practitioners. Practitioners, amazing. Nursing, doctors, fantastic ability to give education. But we have a way that we can present it to families to make them understand it and follow it and prevent those injuries from coming into the hospital. So that's kind of what makes our role very interesting, and days are never the same, which is
very unique
great
situation, I'm sure. You spoke about education, so I want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit more. What should emergency service providers know about safety, for caring and transporting pediatric patients?
Great question. So when it comes to that, there are a lot of factors involved there when it comes to transporting a pediatric patient. There is an organization called NHTSA, or National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. They pulled key experts to the table to say, how are we going to transport these patients? It's going to look way different than it will be when you're transporting an adult. Way different. How can we do that safely? What are the resources available to transport these patients? And so with these group of national experts coming together, they developed protocols. And the tough part with some of this equipment is it's not crash tested. So when you think about the back of an ambulance, you have projectiles left and right. So how are we going to secure them to make sure those patients are safe in transportation? So there are devices that are available for EMS to utilize when it comes to transporting specific patients. There's protocols that were developed now at a national level, but also at a state level that they must follow. And it's tricky because patients, when you, for example, come upon a motor vehicle crash and you have a patient, let's say, being in a car seat, can we transport that patient in that car seat that's already been in a crash safely in the back of an ambulance? The answer is probably no, because that car seat has sustained such force that you now take this very fragile child in a fragile car seat to transport in the back of an ambulance. Not the best way to do it. So we have to look at a lot of different factors. And like I said, there are resources out there. For an example, there's a system called a Pediatric or an ACR4. And those systems are designed to safely transport those patients as long as they're stable and can be transported in that manner, as opposed to being taken out of the car seat. Are they stable enough to do that? Are they stable enough to be in a litter? So there are different situations that were put forth by NHTSA to follow when it comes to EMS and transporting these pediatric patients, because it's tricky. It's very tricky.
So to follow up on some of the, like the Pediatric that you mentioned,
Sure.
Does your organization go out and provide any training in how to properly use these things, or do y'all release any type of publications or resources?
Absolutely, we do. So our EMS providers do have the ability to not only train our in-house tech or our in-house providers, but also outside of that and provide the education. Because again, that is the difficult part here is, not only does Penn State Health transport our pediatric patients, but we have other service providers that do the same and bring them to us that might not be Lifeline, for example. They might not do that. Now, our Lifeline providers do have the ability to obviously transport those critical pediatric patients and can be notified immediately if, let's say, another provider doesn't have the ability or resource or familiarity with transporting a pediatric patient.
So where would some of our listeners, is there a website or where's a place that they could go
Sure.
to find those resources?
Right. So I would actually, not only Lifeline does have great resources on their webpage, but you could also reach out to EMSC or the Emergency Medical Services for Children. They're a great resource. They do have some very nice education on their website. They also have the PAEMS for Children portion of their program, and they do a lot of training when it comes to pediatric transportation as well.
Okay. Is there any specific Penn State Health resources that you want to mention?
Sure. So our pediatric injury prevention program does have a website. If you go to Penn State Health, you can filter through the other pages and come upon pediatric trauma, and then injury prevention is within that page. We do have some great resources. We offer a lot of community programming that's listed on that website, and a lot of educational resources outside of that that we can share. We're in the process of updating it right now, but there is still some really great resources on that page.
So Shannon, one final question. You're integrated into the Pennsylvania area. What about agencies that are outside of Pennsylvania? Do you know of any resources or anything similar that they could tap into?
So when it comes to injury prevention, it is quite a niche. And it's something that's very specific. As a level 1 trauma center, we are required to have an injury prevention department or roles, if you will, fulfilled for that accreditation status. When you look at it as a whole, National Institutes of Health is a great resource when it comes to injury prevention. There are national sources out there. Safe Kids Worldwide is a great resource. They are spanned all throughout the nation as well as outside the U.S. Phenomenal educational resources that are available to the public that anyone can reach or contact. And that would actually, Safe Kids Worldwide would probably be the best because you can find local resources in your community through that website.
So do they have an avenue? I know that some departments in Texas where I primarily work, that they'll do child seat to make sure that they're secured correctly.
Absolutely.
That's one of the functions I believe that site does.
Yes. Safe Kids Worldwide would provide you with those that are in your community to check car seats. That's one of the things at Penn State Health that we've had the ability to span even more. That's probably our biggest program when it comes to looking at motor vehicle crashes and preventing injuries in that manner. We do offer free car seat checks in the community. We have several different locations. We actually just received some funding, not just, but a couple years ago, received some funding from Giant Foods. That allows us to expand our reach even further and provide car seats to families that cannot afford them. They're referred to our program. And so we do set those weekly appointments as well that families can check. And if you're not local, we can find someone in your area that would be able to do that.
Awesome. Well, Shannon, it's a pleasure having you on today. I really enjoyed talking to you, and it was a pleasure meeting you.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
And I want to thank you for listening to the program today and for your interest in VFIS safety resources. I want to thank our guest, Shannon DePatto, once again for her time and information. Please consider subscribing to our program to stay up to date on new content releases. Also, if you like what you've heard, please consider leaving a review below. For more information about the many resources available from VFIS, please visit VFIS.com. And to submit ideas for future discussions, please reach out by email at VFISriskcontrol@VFIS.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Gladfelter Insurance Group, VFIS, and its employees. Additionally, all views, information, or opinions expressed are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal, medical, or other professional advice on any subject matter.